Hello everyone, this is a video from American English Academy. Today we're going to be learning about the simple past tense. I'm your teacher, Mr. Kenneth Varela, and I'll be guiding you through this on this video. Stay tuned, pay attention, and let's begin. It is important to recognize that in order to build sentences in English, we need a subject. Without a subject, we don't have a sentence. That's why I have here all the subject pronouns that you need to know. Every subject pronoun goes accordingly to a specific form of the verb be. Today we're going to be learning the forms of the verb be in the past. But let's look at the question. It says, where were you yesterday? There are many ways in which you can answer this question, but we're going to do it in a very simple way. Where were you yesterday? You can say at the beach, at the club, at home, at school, in the bag, at the cinema, at the airport, at the shopping. But in order to have a full answer, a complete answer, we need the presence of the verb be. And you will see that we have two options, was or where. It all depends on the subject we are dealing with. I was at the beach. You were at the club. He was at home. She was at school. It was in the bag. We were at the cinema. You were at the airport. They were at shopping. This is only affirmative statements, but we don't only have affirmative statements. We could also create negative sentences. Where were you yesterday? Well, I wasn't at the beach. You weren't at the club. He wasn't at home. She wasn't at school. It wasn't in the bag. We weren't at the cinema. You weren't at the airport. They weren't at the shopping. As you can see, wasn't and weren't is the contraction form of was not and were not. We also have questions. Where were you yesterday? We're going to build up questions, and remember the questions begin with the verb be. In this case, the verb be in the past. You're going to have pretty much the same locations that we had before. And our first word is going to be the verb be. Was I at the beach? Were you at the club? Was he at home? Was she at school? Was it in the bag? Were we at the cinema? Were you at the airport? Start your questions with the corresponding form of the verb be, then the subject, and then the rest of the sentence or its complement. Where were you yesterday? This is a good question to start a conversation, and there, as we said before, there are many ways to answer them. I was at the beach, you can say. And you? So we have these two elements, I as a pronoun and at home a location. You can answer that question by saying I was at home, or he was at the park. He was at the park. Where were you yesterday? Well, you and the location is the bank. So you say you were at the bank. She and school. She was at school. It and the table. It was It was on the table. We and the theater. We were. We were at the theater. They and the shopping. They were. They were at the shopping. Along with this, we could also learn about regular and irregular verbs. And we're going to start off with regular verbs. And we know that in order to convert a sentence from simple present to simple past, we have to look at the verb. The verb is everything in this case, and that is what changes. What we do is to add the letter D or letter ed at the end of the main verb to convert a simple present tense verb into a simple past tense verb. As you can see here, we have two examples. I worked in a shop last year. I lived in a big house when I was younger. The main verb in the first example is the word work, but when we add ed, it sounds like worked. The main verb in the second example is the word leave, and then we add ed, and it sounds like leaved. Here we have one more example. I worked hard last weekend. Talking and expressing yourself about the past is simple. You only have to follow the rule of adding d or ed to the main verb for regular verbs. But we also have what we call irregular verbs. Now with this ones we have to be a little bit more careful because they don't really follow any rules. Okay, we are not going to add ed or d to the end of these verbs. What we have to do is to memorize them. For example, the simple present tense verb is go, and the simple past tense form of go is went. For come is came. For buy is bought. For drink is drank. For eat is ate. Find is found. See is saw. The only way around this is to memorize them because they do not follow any particular rules, okay? Later in another video, I'm going to teach you how we can memorize them easily. I went to Paris last July. We can say this is something that happened in the past already. No longer true in the present. Okay, how do we form negative sentences? We bring the use of did as an auxiliary verb. And look how this formula explains it all in a very simple way. We use did not or didn't in contraction form plus the base form of the verb. And remember this, after auxiliary verbs, we tend to write the base form of verb. This is a golden rule for many grammatical structures. Do not have the auxiliary verb and the base form of the verb in the same tense because it's incorrect. So the guideline given by the auxiliary verb is that the sentence will be in the past once you start writing did or didn't, and the base form of the verb only helps complement that sentence. Here you have one example. I didn't live in a flat during my last summer holidays. I didn't go to Berlin last July. Just remember, auxiliary verb in the past, main verb in its basic form. Now, regular and irregular verbs. Interrogative. We're going to look at how we build up questions. And we start our question with the word did, which is the auxiliary verb. Then we have a subject and then the base form of the verb. Look at what we have right here. Did you play sports last summer? Auxiliary verb, subject, main verb. And the main verb still is in basic form. That doesn't change. Did you travel by boat last holidays? The answer is yes, I did. There are only two ways to answer the kind of question. You can say yes or no. Did you see any dolphins? No, I didn't. Okay, this is a table of how you can see these verbs are managed. Okay, I'm going to leave this one here for you to study it later. But as you can see, I have examples of affirmative statements with the ed already there, because these are simple past tense affirmative statements. Negative with the use of did. Questions, and the two ways to answer these questions, whether the answer could be yes or no. You could always come back to this part of the video and study each of the cases. Now, very important is to understand when we have to use every kind of grammatical structure. Okay, so here I have it. When do we have to use the simple past tense? Basically, we use the simple past tense to talk about actions that were finished at a particular time in the past. Okay, we can even include specific times or dates when we mention when these events happened. And along with it, you could also use some time expressions like yesterday, last month, and many others. Okay, as the example says, last year I took my exam. Took is a simple past tense of take. Okay, meaning that this is a finished action that no longer happens. So we can use the simple past tense to talk about a specific finished actions at a specific time. We could also use it to talk about events that happen over a period of time. Okay, for example, here it says, I lived in Asia for 2 years. This is a period of time. No longer anymore. I don't live in Asia any longer. And we can use the simple past tense to talk about habits or routines that we had in the past. When I was a child, we always went to the seaside on bank holidays. Okay, it was a habit or routine that repeated over and over and over again. Now, in order to express ourselves about the simple past tense, we could also use some time expressions like yesterday, last month, last year, last time, ago, in. There are many others, but if you manage to work these ones out, you're going to be just fine. Look at the examples. As my friend traveled to Saudi Arabia 2 years ago. Thank you for your attention, and I hope to see you again in another video from American English Academy. I just hope that this video was useful for you to understand a little bit more about the simple past tense and the verb be, taking into account that we have regular and irregular verbs. Stay tuned, and I'll see you again next time.